Imagine with me for a moment that you are out with your friends and you all decide to go to a brothel. You go and you ring the bell and the metal gate is released. And as you enter, you're met with the smell of body spray and cigarettes. And as your eyes adjust to the very dimly lit room, you look and see close to 20 women standing in front of you, dressed to entice for your pleasure. The madam instructs each woman to state their name, and with their hands behind their back, they begin to do that. And you look each one over. And you continue doing that until you reach the very last woman. And then you realize standing in front of you is your mother, an object for sale. I want you to consider that every day, someone's mother, daughter, or sister is being sold. And the experience is not always free from rape or abuse. I've been in prostitution with women, working with women in prostitution for a little over 7 years. And for 4 years, my team and I would go out into the brothel and take them gifts that had no strings attached, except to let them know they're loved and valued. And it's through these visits I began to realize the toll that prostitution can take. We live in an area where prostitution and brothels are legal. Every day you can drive by these brothels and be completely unaffected by what happens in them because we believe the lies from pimps that say that they are there by choice and they love the work that they do. And that was me. I was unaffected and disengaged. So when did my feelings change? Well, one day I was sitting in my hair salon and I noticed a woman next to me who had areas on her head that had hair gone to the roots. She appeared to be suffering from some unknown illness. And as they were replacing extensions to cover that, I asked, what is she suffering from? And I was told, no, she had a rough episode of sex out in the brothel, and so they're recovering them up. At that moment, I began to see prostitution and human trafficking differently. We live in an area where you can drive by them every day and be unaffected. Edmund Burke once said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is good men would do nothing. And so for me at that moment, I could no longer do anything. I had to do something. You may have watched the HBO show Cat House, filmed out here in Lyon County. You may have even gone out and taken a tour of the brothel and find the whole experience a little bit intriguing, and that it appears to empower women. But in fact, that's nothing more than a smoke and mirrors publicity stunt. Every day, women, children, and young men are being sold. Make no mistake, this is human modern-day slavery. Think about it. Think about a job where every day you could have the possibility to be raped or abused, most certainly mocked and belittled. And then think about a boss who minimizes that and expects you to return to work the next shift and do it all over again, day after day, month after month, and year after year until you become broken physically and psychologically, until you're discarded for the next young, fresh victim to start the whole pattern over again. America has one state that has legal prostitution, and that is Nevada. And the existence of legal brothels allows for illegal human trafficking to come and go unnoticed. Every day, you can enter these brothels and realize that there's abuse happening. Prostitution is one that preys on the most vulnerable in our society. These are women like you and like me, and they're just trying to make the best of a bad situation. Everything about the brothel is a facade. Once you take a step into that sex industry, your choices are no longer freely yours. Shifts run 12 to 14 hours a day. You don't have a choice when the bell rings to line up. It's mandatory, and if you miss a lineup on your shift, you're fined. You don't have the opportunity to choose whether or not to refuse a buyer. Management instills rivalry to compete for who can be the prettiest or most seductive to make the top dollar. You are competing for every dollar that walks through the door. What happens behind closed doors is termed as a party, as if what happens is one big happy experience. I would like you to consider that rape and abuse should never be associated with the term party. You don't have the freedom to leave at any time. Retribution from the pimp is a terrifying reality. Daily room and board is tallied up, as well as weekly medical treatments, and they're taken and charged against your earnings. The brothel takes half of everything that you earn up front. So if you have no income, you still are having debt every day. Your room is where you live and also where you work. Would you work in those kind of conditions? Conversations I've had with a lot of women have a recurring theme, and that is that they were exposed to pornography and sexual abuse at early ages, often between 5 and 8. And a few women have shared an experience of a sexual assault as early as 3 years old. The natural progression when this happens to you at such an early age is to take control of what happens to you. And so a conditioned response is to enter the sex industry. Somehow we've been led to believe that the rhetoric that they love what they do and they're there by choice okays abuse and exploitation. And you might ask me, well, why make the choice in the first place? I believe the choice for some is because they don't have another choice. Some women choose to be out there, and they're funding their dream. And some women have not experienced traumatic physical experiences. But for either choice, women are being sold and exploited. I believe powerful stories always help us understand. And I'd like to share a couple of them with you today. One night I received a call from a woman at 3 a.m. in the morning, and she was crying and obviously traumatized. She told me she had just been raped. After being pulled away from the panic button several times, and yes, every room has a panic button in case they find themselves in danger. And with her screams for help going unnoticed, she was brutally raped. When the madam finally heard her cries for help and walked in the door, she looked at the man and she said, "I'm sorry this happened to you. You can choose another girl in the house." And as that man left the room, he turned and looked at the woman that he had just raped laying on the bed and laughed. You might say, well, how could you even say rape is a part of a brothel? When a man enters the brothel and negotiates an experience and then goes beyond what was consented to and negotiated, that is rape. And this type of behavior does happen often in the brothel. But when it happens to someone you know, it becomes more personal. After talking to our local law enforcement, they informed me that it is nearly impossible to enforce a rape allegation in the brothel because the pimp, the owner, management, all state it was consensual. On another occasion, we were invited out to the brothel, and a woman had committed suicide, and 2 women had found her alone in her room and were told to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and CPR until the ambulance arrived. When it was determined that she had been dead for nearly 6 hours, the brothel management told these women, "Okay, she's dead. This is a place of business. Get back to work," as her body is being wheeled out in front of them. That is inhumane. Not long ago, a young woman was exploited for her virginity. and a $1 million online auction commenced to be the first one to take her virginity. She was paraded around in a black silk robe and a chastity belt, paraded for sale. But when it was determined that it was just a publicity stunt, she was discarded, the virgin, and the auction. You see, lives don't matter in the sex industry if you don't produce revenue for the pimp. I have a friend who was making a lot of money in the sex industry, and she chose to leave and began to adjust to life outside of the industry. It became difficult, and she wanted to find some work. But what do you put on your resume? Marketing? She was so excited to finally find a job. She was going to be a receptionist in an attorney's office. And as she came to work so excited to begin a new chapter, they told her, "We found out what you did at your last employment, so we can't have you be our receptionist, but you can take out our trash." I believe every woman has the right to freedom and dignity and to be held as someone that we hold dear. We have the choice. We have the choice to end human slavery. We have the choice to stop purchasing women for sex. And I believe together we can do it. What if we could change her life? What if she could be known not for what she did, but for who she is? For me, doing nothing is not an option any longer. But what could you do? Well, you can see her differently. You could employ her. You could give her a hand up. You could be part of changing legislation. Porn fuels abuse. You can stop watching it. And most certainly, we need to stop buying her. I believe we can give her hope and courage and empower her voice to be heard and let her know that no matter what's happened in her past, her value remains strong. She's no longer for sale, and that her voice matters. Thank you.